Alright, so this is my audience. Okay. So, is it possible for you to make millions of dollars in the celebrity world with no real artistic talent and no college education? Well, that's exactly what we've seen over the past few years with the rise of reality stars. Reality shows that you and I used to watch growing up have changed and are now focused more on people like you and me. I, having gone through this process over the past few years, have found it to be very interesting, all the parts that are associated, like the casting, the development, and the filming. Those are the lesser-known sides of reality shows that we don't get to see on camera. So most of us don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, and that's what I want to share with you today. Well, this whole process can be very overwhelming. So where do you start? Well, as David Rupel, a writer and producer for MTV's The Real World, said, your show needs to fit into one of two categories, either heavily structured or little structured. Let's start with little structure. Well, David Rupel stated that a show with little structure would turn everyday events into stories. An example of this kind of show would be like Keeping Up with the Kardashians or Duck Dynasty. The cameramen will film days and days and days of footage, or weeks and weeks and weeks of footage, and then they will then go back in post-production and try to find a storyline based off of what they filmed. A show of this type will take longer to film because it is unscripted and unstructured. But as Mr. Rupel states, a show with heavy structure will have an end result in mind. A show of this sort would be something like Survivor or The Bachelor, a game show or a competition show. These kinds of shows have an end result and they know what they're going for. Dan Abrams, the producer of the Producers Guild of America, says that shows like these can be filmed almost half the time of an unstructured show. Why? Well, Mr. Abrams explains that 2 to 3 days worth of filming is enough footage for a 1-hour episode, as opposed to the 6 to 7 days it takes to film an unstructured show. So now that you know what you're going to create, now it's time to bring in the big guns, the networks. As Mia Casalvo wrote in her chapter on reality television in the book of St. James Encyclopedia of Popular Culture, producers are looking for unique worlds and unique characters that would be entertaining to watch. David Rupel gives an example of these shows, and an example of those shows would be Deadliest Catch or The Real Housewives. These shows, the show like Deadliest Catch, it shows a group of men out at sea, which is not something you see every day. And so you see these men surviving out at sea, and that's just not something we watch, so that's very entertaining to us. Or, like The Real Housewives, we get a glimpse inside the worlds or the problems of the rich people that, they're trying to survive as well, but in a different situation. So once you know what your unique quality is, then it's time to take your idea to the network. Mr. Abrams says that he receives reality show pitch ideas from not just well-known producers in LA, but from soccer moms, car salesmen, doctors, bakers, average people. Dan Abrams continues to further explain that he receives thousands of pitch ideas each year and turns a large majority down because they don't hold a unique cast or a unique world that is unheard of to the general public, so it just wouldn't be interesting. They're just simply unable to justify their uniqueness, and they're unable to justify as to how a network should invest millions and millions of dollars into their project. So the key to the pitch, Mr. Rupel explains, is to know the market you're targeting and to do some research on your network. The TV Writers Vault, which contributes to over 300 leading television production companies, states that the most important thing that you can do is know your audience you're targeting and know which network to pitch to. You want to find a gap in the particular age market so that network can fill that gap, because filling the gap means money for the network. Well, now that the hard part's over, you successfully convinced the network to invest in your project. It's time to start production. Dan Abrams explains that it's time to start putting your story together. Just like any good story, the season needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mr. Rupel admits that the show that he worked on, MTV's The Real World, him and his team would take different events on screen and they'd have to write in some situations just to make it a little more dramatic and add some voiceovers to make the story flow. They also write scenes in to provide plot twists to keep the viewer coming back. David Rupel said that footage aired in the order in TV is not always the same as they filmed. Mr. Rupel explained that scenes can be filmed weeks apart and placed in subsequent order to produce the story that they're looking for. Mr. Abrams states that in his experience, cast members of the show that he is a part of will often complain that there's too much edited out, and so the viewer doesn't get the full experience. Well, the reason that is because in any good story, you want to get straight to the point or the viewer will lose interest. So at the end of the day, you are trying to build a story and put something together that is entertaining to the viewer. So, now that you know that producing a reality show involves creative development, unique pitching, and a lot of filming, what does it mean for you? Well, that means that you can now start looking for your spot on TV. Whether it be singing, surviving, shopping, or shooting, there's a spot for everyone. So, what's your spot?